Hey guys, Marble Tyler here, and today we're talking about the Spyro Remastered trilogy. Now, if it's going to happen, why it should happen, and right off the bat I want to acknowledge that this morning, at the time of this recording, there were some leaked images posted online of what should be the remaster, as well as a leaked box art, and it was all from Amazon Mexico or something like that. Very credible source, so we're really hoping, obviously they've been teasing it with these Spyro egg things, so they've been teasing these releases, but hopefully we're finally getting the announcement, and the speculation is that there's going to be a September, it's not 7th, maybe it was like 21st release date, so don't quote me on that, but that's what's being teased, I guess, or, well, that was leaked, but they're also teasing a release, so it's probably definitely going to happen. But for today's topic, we want to talk about why it needs to happen. So I do want to cover why, basically, Spyro and Crash Bandicoot both take the exact same path in history, starting as, they were PS1 classics. So the original Crash Bandicoot, followed by a year later, the Cortex Strikes Back, and then a year after that was Crash Bandicoot Warped. Great, very beloved trilogy, obviously, because they remade it, and it sold really well, and people love it, and they want more. But not too long after that, literally the Crash Bandicoot 3 disc had a demo for the first Spyro game. Now, Crash Bandicoot was made by Naughty Dog, and Spyro was made by Insomniac. Naughty Dog went on to make, let's see here, they made Jak and Daxter, they made, obviously, Uncharted, Last of Us. Naughty Dog went on to make very successful games. Insomniac created Spyro, eventually went on to make Ratchet and Clank and Sunset Overdrive for the Xbox. They're currently making the PS4 Spider-Man game that we also cover on this channel. So, both well-known, well-established developers, and these were their starting titles on the PS1. And so Insomniac Games went on to create Spyro the Dragon, and then afterwards they created Spyro Ripto's Rage, which is my personal favorite. And after that there was Year of the Dragon. So another beloved classic trilogy. Now Crash Bandicoot on the PS1 did go off to make some spin-offs. There's Crash Bash and Crash Team Racing. Crash Team Racing being one of the best racing games of all time, or at least arcade racings. Spyro never got that. But both original developers moved on when the PS2 came. So Jak and Daxter was Naughty Dog's next series, and Insomniac moved on to Ratchet and Clank. But Spyro and Crash did continue, and they continued under new developers in a new direction. Now, starting off on the PS2, we had Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex. I played this game back in the day. I personally enjoyed it, but the general consensus is that it wasn't received well, and the reason is it was dated. By the time the PS2 came around, we had Jak and Daxter and some other stuff, and so when Crash came around and it didn't really improve the movement system, there were new abilities, but it didn't really improve anything. It really showed. It really looked dated. The art style was kind of weird looking because it was like animated, supposed to represent Crash, but it looked like kind of plasticky. It just didn't go well. That and the bad guy was interesting, but nothing special. So now they also made Spyro Enter the Dragonfly. Again, don't remember the developers for either of these games, but Spyro did a very similar thing, whereas it was kind of dated. They did try to improve and add new features. They added new, like, fire breaths and stuff like that, but it, again, didn't go well, wasn't really received well. I don't think either of these games had great critical scores, and I think they did okay in terms of revenue, but neither game really showed off, like, what the series did on the PS1, and that's mainly because they were just dated. Now, yet again, Crash did go off to have its own spin-off games. There was another Crash racing game. It wasn't received as well. It was Crash Nitro Racing. And it did have one of the greatest Crash games ever, which kind of deviated a little bit. It built off of the original concept, but it did introduce new elements, which was Crash Twinsanity, which is, again, one of also my favorites. The PS2 games are probably my favorite Crash games. From the racing games to the Twinsanity to all of them. Those are my favorites, but again, they didn't do as well as they would hope, and as well as Spyro and Crash for the PS2 era did also come to Xbox and other platforms. So at this point, they're no longer exclusive to PlayStation. They've moved on to multiple platforms, which is the way it should be. I do believe. I do think we should get away from exclusives in general, but that's a conversation for a different time. Now, at this point, both series aren't doing that hot, so they decided to make some mobile titles. There's just a various amount. The coolest of them being there was actually a crossover between these two series where there was a Crash Orange where he took on Ripto or something like that. Or no, it was Crash Purple They took on Ripto from, again, my favorite, Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage. And then there was Spyro Orange, I believe, and that was the other crossover for Spyro taking on Cortex, I believe. Both games were okay. I mean, they were Game Boy games, so it's not like they had much to offer, especially compared to like the original series. And this is where we get to about the mid 2000s, the mid to late 2000s, which is where we really kind of kill off both of these franchise characters. First of all, we had Crash of the Titans and that game's sequels, and it really took Crash and made him into a beat 'em up game. It wasn't the same. They removed like his gloves, and now he's got these abilities, and then that had like the Titan games or the Mutant games or whatever they were, and they just didn't do well. It wasn't Crash, and the latest one, it literally felt like Crash wasn't even the main character. I mean, it was rough. And then they also made the Legend of Spyro trilogy, and these set of games were alright, but they took themselves extremely seriously. They tried to update the graphics a little bit, and it looked okay. Like, it wasn't great, but it also got left behind by the 360 era, because this game came out. The first one was, I want to say, it's like 2006, then it was 2007, 2008. Most of them were on the PS2, and at this point, the Xbox 360, and then eventually the PS3 were coming out, and all but the last one were on last gen. These games got left behind. The heavy changes they made just kind of left them, more to be desired. Both of these games were on multiple platforms, didn't sell that well, weren't received that well, and kind of put the final nail in the coffin of like, okay, this series is done for a while. And then, over the past couple of years, we had hope. These series were coming back as Skylanders, and they're beautiful. And oh god, don't make me look at it. That is awful. Yeah, the Crash isn't that bad, but Spyro, oof, don't ever do that to Spyro again. Yeah, Skylanders kind of made the presence of them known as like, wow, what did you do to these characters? And because of that, it even got the people enough talking. That's like, well, let's see the original characters. And then here we are. We have the Crash Bandicoot, the Insane trilogy, or the Insane trilogy. That's what it is, and it's great. And yeah, there's a couple adjustments with the movement system. I understand that. Whatever. With that being aside, it's great, and people love it, and people bought it, and everyone wants to play it. And now everyone wants Spyro. Personally, I always preferred Spyro to Crash, not because Crash was awful, but Spyro was always my favorite. That's why I played as a kid, and yeah, let's get the Spyro trilogy going. Again, there's leaks, there's rumors, and it's basically confirmed. We know it's going to happen. The question is just how soon. I'm really hoping that September release date's true. It means it's early enough to avoid some of the other big hitters in the fall, and I'll be able to play a ton of it by the time it comes out. So that's why we need a Spyro remaster. It followed the path of Crash, and it wasn't, didn't have as many spin-offs as Crash, but it deserves to be remastered just like Crash. They should be remastering it, then making fully new titles using, the old characters and models and everything else. These are classic series. Some of my favorites from when I was a child. And honestly, some of the favorites when many people were children. Or if you weren't a child, you became a child because you loved this game. And if I just generalized you, you are now a child. So, overall, we want this trilogy, please. This reignited trilogy, please be true. Other than that, check back to STG. We're going to cover it as soon as it's announced. And I can't wait for it to come out in the fall. We're going to be able to play it. We're going to do all kinds of cool stuff with it.